welcome everyone to New Wave. This is the first ever really live episode of Sound Advice, which is exciting and scary at the same time. We've got two really cool panels for you and some great live music. So, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, do you want to just start? Do you want to just introduce both yourselves and what you do?
Yes. Do you want to go first?
You go.
I'm Mally, so I do artist management and social media marketing. That pretty much sums up most of what I do, but I also do help out freelance on different artist campaigns, doing lots of various broader spectrum things, and host the occasional event.
Like this?
Just like this, yeah.
What about you?
Fantastic. My name is Simeon. I work at the Musicians Union, so we're a trade union that represents musicians, and we have 35,000 members in the UK that work across all aspects of the music industry. So we have people who work in orchestras, people who play in the West End, in theatre. We have featured artists, session musicians, a whole host of different people. And what we do is we support musicians whenever they need help with their work-related issues, whether that's unpaid gig fees, gig cancellations, issues with their manager, all kinds of stuff. And that's what we do.
Yeah, so this first panel is going to be all about sort of music marketing, that kind of stuff. So just to sort of start that aspect of things, like when should artists sort of start thinking about marketing their music?
As soon as they've got it recorded, written, like it's really difficult to pinpoint a moment because you should be, if you're considering starting a project, solo or band-wise, marketing should be something you're considering from the get-go. You know, otherwise, how are you going to promote your music, yourself, your gigs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting though because you said there like promoting your music, promoting your gigs. There's so many sort of. I think one of the reasons maybe artists don't get started is that there's so many different things that you're meant to promote. Like you said, like your music on streaming services, gigs, and merch, and all kinds of stuff. Sort of where should artists sort of get started? What should you be marketing in the first place?
It's overwhelming, isn't it, right? There's so many aspects for you to consider. And I think it's about you and like your story, first of all, and what you are. And like, first of all, you existing in some sort of social media or marketing sort of space where you're able to sell yourself, sell your story, maybe like a bit of authenticity, let people in a bit, maybe not too much. I think it's good to set some boundaries. But like, so I think it's about, start by telling your story. I think if you've got some music, I think that's important. I think you need to have something for people to listen to. And so if you've got something recorded and you've got like a plan for when you're going to launch it and a campaign, then it's about starting to tease it, isn't it? I mean, like everything is like teased to death these days compared to what it was.
Big things coming soon.
But yeah, big things coming soon. Like, but honestly, like I think if people don't know your chorus by the time you're launching it, you've kind of failed, right? And I mean that in the nicest way possible. But like you're going to be creating like 50 different like real versions of the same like 5-second snippet of your chorus hook or whatever. And I think that's important. So I think have something that you can start working with to start marketing whatever it is, whether it's a gig, whether it's a launch or something. But just like really, absolutely like relentlessly slogging at it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting, though, because, like, you say about everyone needs to know your chorus before it's out, but, like, 5 years ago, that probably wasn't true. So, like, when the goalposts are always moving and algorithms are changing, all that kind of things, how do you sort of figure out what works in the first place?
It's all trial and error. You know, you've got to try things to work out if they work for you, and everything works differently for different people and different artists. But also looking at knowing your market base and knowing who's similar to you, what are they doing that's working really well? Could I replicate that? Could I make it my own in some sort of way? You know, take like a day in the life video, for example. That's a really easy one to make your own because it is you, it's not them in the video. All you've took is the concept and developed it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's really important about identifying, and that's the same for everything in the music industry, isn't it, really? It's like identifying where the place is that you want to sit. That might help you identify some audience that you might want to engage with. That might identify some people you want to support and be a support act for in a live setting, or it might be someone you want to collaborate with in a different way. So yeah, I think absolutely, like, know your market, try stuff out. Like, what could go wrong, really? unless you're going to get cancelled for doing something really problematic. Like,
just don't do that.
Why don't you try stuff? Like something horrendous I saw the other day was like someone who I won't name and I won't recommend, creates 23 reels a day, deletes 21 of them, and posts 2 of them, keeps 2 of them, right?
Wow.
The 2 that get the most engagement, which I'm not saying you should do this because I think that's just like over the top. And they also made a really over the top comparison to a very famous artist, saying, it's like a work of art and you've got to fine tune it. So that's like the extreme version of it. But actually it's like, trial and error. Like try stuff out, make your 23 reels. If 2 of them work, keep them. Don't do that. But that's like the extreme version of what you could do, like trying stuff out, yeah.
But I mean, I think there's ways that you can do that without just sort of bombarding people and that kind of stuff. Like, there's so many different platforms where you can share content now. So you can do, I remember, I saw a panel here actually at Sound City earlier this year where they were sort of saying about this artist who basically has a YouTube Shorts that isn't sort of connected to their account and just shares stuff and deletes it within the day and just sees, and he was even going into sort of the watch time graphic and seeing, that's where people drop off, so I'm going to cut that bit, and then sort of sharing it on all the other platforms, and then it immediately does well because you've had that trial and error. But you can do things like that. You don't have to be that systematic necessarily, but trial and error is definitely like such an important part of it. Speaking about those like different platform stuff, are there platforms that you sort of have to be on? Should you be on all of them? Should you be on just a couple of them? What do you think?
So my opinion, and not a lot of people agree with me on this, is pick one and do it well. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't think, I've got to be on TikTok because everyone is. It's not necessarily the case. I think Instagram is probably one of the bigger platforms in terms of industry people on it, local people on it checking. TikTok's very specific video-related content. If you do it well, that's amazing and that's for you. But if you're also overwhelmed by talking, to a camera or posting video content, stick to Instagram, do it well, build your following, build your fan base.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, pick what works for you, what works for your genre, what works for your fan base, potentially. I think Instagram and TikTok are like the obvious examples, right? And I think, I agree with you. I think TikTok, maybe it's my age, I don't know. Maybe you get like more meaningful engagement with that to some extent, but then there's like perhaps more creative engagement on a TikTok perspective if you have that sort of collaboration. But yeah, definitely. Just what feels comfortable for you and what you're comfortable with. And obviously, again, trial and error. Yeah, you can try different platforms and see where you get the engagement and where people are listening to you.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's an interesting one because you have, if your skill set isn't suited to making videos, then TikTok probably isn't the place for you to be on, even if you do see, and it's easy to compare yourself to others as well, where like you see a band that doing like loads of views on TikTok or something and getting loads of gigs and success out of it, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be the right path for you, right?
Yeah, completely. Again, it just comes down to knowing yourself and your market base and what you want to achieve ultimately with your social platforms and your marketing. Are you doing it for following? Are you doing it for engagement? Are you doing it to sell merch, tickets? Working that out first, I think, helps.
I think something you touched on earlier is like, data is king these days, and we've got so much data available to us about like who's engaging with what type of person they are. And so you can use that and you can like turn it into rich information. What type of demographic is engaging with your posts? When are they doing it? What are they doing? What do they like? What do they not like? The risk with overusing the data, going back to the guy that posts 23 reels a day, right, is that you end up becoming like a one-trick pony that just does one thing. And that's the problem. If you find out like, every time I do this specific thing, I get loads of engagement, so I'm just going to keep posting this, I think that's just like a bit boring. So you've got to keep it diverse at the same time and keep trying things. Because as you say, trends shift, like industry trends shift, audiences shift. So yeah, keep it diverse and engaging, but also like, use the data, because there is data there. And you might find out actually, oh wow, everyone in Newcastle really likes this. Let's go and gig there. That could be really useful data.
Yeah. It's difficult though, because I think like if you completely optimize for what the data is sort of telling you to do, you're not necessarily optimizing what you're doing for the right things. Because if you're trying to get lots of views on TikTok, let's say, and you just sort of analyze all your videos to do that, you're really just building watch time. But that's so different to like actual impact. Like you can have a video that gets 1,000 views, but that like actually genuinely touches like 50 people, and that's so much more meaningful than 1 million views. That is sort of, I don't know. You see a lot of videos these days that you feel like are almost tricking you to keep watching or something, and that's not going to lead. That's not going to set you on the path to like being a fan, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people just do mimic what they think is intriguing, and like what you were saying with videos that kind of replay into themselves. It's one of them I've fell foul to it. Like I'll watch and I'll watch again and I'll watch again because I'm like, what's actually gone on here? And I do get the appeal for people, let's recreate that. That's the easiest way to do it. But again, it's just, you've got to work out what works for you and trial and error. That might work for some people, might not work for you.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to talk about so you're saying about some things that are maybe like not best practice. Are there any other sort of like red flags or like bad things that you've seen? You mentioned someone making 23 reels a day, but are there any sort of like other mistakes that you'd avoid on social media?
I'm having a think. You can go.
I think it's all about balance, right? The engagement bait thing, which you brought up just then, about if I post something really controversial or topless or whatever, it might get like the engagement, and that there's a debate there, right? It gets people through the door, gets them maybe listening to your music, but then obviously it's just a bit like people can see through the cynicism. So I think it does come back to that authenticity and like showing your true self and being a bit real and letting people in a little bit, but also I think it's really interesting. Like Chapel Roan's a really interesting example, right? Because she's mega, right? And I'm not trying to be like, oh my God, I liked her before she was cool. But like some of us have been following her for a long time. We've seen her before she was mega, and now she's gone like mega, right? And she's like setting up some boundaries, and she's like being really interesting about how she's doing that, and she's not like letting the whole thing consume her. And I think that's like really healthy. So I think that's good. And I think wearing my musicians union hat, I should always like be pushing for like the healthy musician that's like doing the thing that's right for their mental health. And if your mental health is poor, go and see Music Minds Matter. They're a free 24-hour helpline for everyone in the music industry, and you should go and engage with them. They're a great charity from Help Musicians, Music Minds Matter. Check them out. But yeah, I think like just finding that balance amongst the whole situation of what you're doing. Like, do I do a bit of engagement bait? Do I try different things? Yeah, I think that's it. Balance.
Yeah, just on that topic of mental health and stuff, I know a lot of artists feel like there's this sort of idea that you didn't sign up to be a content creator, and now you're a content creator and you spend more time making TikTok videos than you do making music and that kind of stuff. How do you make content in a way that is authentic to you and actually appeals to your creativity and the reason that you got into music in the first place?
You've got to do it. Like, when you make content, it's got to be content you enjoy. That you've got to put yourself first in that aspect. Otherwise, you're just not going to enjoy it. I used to hate posting on social media, and then ended up doing all these things, and was like, I've got to kind of love it because it's turning into a bit of a job now. And I actually really enjoy now sitting, editing reels, editing photos, making the content itself. And it's just finding something that works for you, looking at content, engaging with it, seeing, I don't really like that, but, I could replicate that.
I think that's really interesting as well, something you just said about, like, it feeling like a job, right? And I guess that's it, right? We've got to take ourselves seriously, and this is a career, and it's a job, and it's like a serious job, and like, don't underplay that. And this is me saying what you said is wrong, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's like, don't underplay the fact that like you're doing a very serious thing. Yes, you're an artist. Yes, you're passionate about it, and yes, it's such a privilege to work in the music industry. Like, all of us that do it, isn't it amazing to work in the music industry in whatever capacity that is? But it's also about like building your team, right? So if it is becoming too overwhelming for you to create content, but you know that is part of the job that needs to be done by someone, like, is there someone you can collaborate with? Is there a manager who can help you? Are there people who can help you create the content and take some of that pressure off, that like constant stress in the background? Because you might need to focus on like writing, performing, other parts of your like life, personal life, as well as the work life. So it's that finding that balance. It's the work-life balance. It's the like artist work balance. And like, yeah, it's great. The music industry is great. It should be a great place to work. It's challenging. It's hard. It's like not an easy place to make a load of money. But all of that aside, get a good team. Get an accountant. Get a manager. Get whatever. Get all the people you need to make it work.
Yeah, on that topic of teams, obviously, Mally, you're an artist manager. Sort of how, with the marketing side, how involved are you with like content creation and that sort of side of things?
It ranges per project. So I'm fortunate with some artists where they're like, leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. And in that case, I'm like, great, I don't want to get involved if you're happy and it's going well, and it is going well for them. With others, it's like breaking it down to basics and just being like, what do you struggle with? Where can I help? Sitting down, having a conversation, making some bullet points, making some notes. And I always say, like, to them at the start, I'm like, have you got a social media scheduler? Like, if you got something where we could sit down for a day, we could record, like, 100 videos, say, and then you've got a platform where you can just upload it and you don't have to think for 2 months because it's all done. And it's surprising the amount of people that don't know they exist. And a lot of free software out there that you can access. As long as you have an Instagram account, Facebook account, you can get access to these schedulers. And that's usually my advice.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's looking for a free one, Metrical's really good, but there's loads of like free and like paid softwares for that. And it's sort of, you were talking about like doing one social media platform and doing it well. But with a scheduler, because you can sort of put things out on two platforms, you have that ability to probably focus it onto what's going to work best for, say, Instagram, but then all that video content can also go on TikTok within the same amount of clicks. So it just gives you that sort of extra reach and extra sort of avenues where you might think that your audience is going to be on Instagram and then suddenly find that there's loads of people who are into what you're doing on TikTok or Threads or something like that. So you have that ability to do a sort of bit of both. So we're talking about sort of like the manager relationship stuff. When do you think an artist needs to start thinking about getting a manager?
It's different for every artist, it really is, because there's some artists that do manage themselves and they do it really well. But I think it gets, when you're struggling and you're not really sure where you can take yourself further on your own, I think you should always get basic skills in managing yourself and seeing, I've learned that, I understand that. And I think it helps because I think if you're getting managed straight from the get-go, you don't particularly learn the skills yourself, so you feel really reliant on a manager. And I think you should have certain skills, but it's that point of when you realise, actually, I think I'm limited now in my skills. I need someone to get involved and help with the workload and help search for opportunities.
Yeah, and I think in like the modern music industry, like some of those apps and tools you mentioned, like in some ways it's like never been easier, right? But in many ways it's never been harder, right? Because it's like it's easier because it's like it can be very DIY, right? Like not that long ago, like it was really hard to get on like a DSP or iTunes, and now you just use an aggregator and it's pretty easy. It's like a one-day process or whatever. And it used to be like really difficult to engage with fans or whatever, but now it's like actually there's direct access to people, but the expectations on artists are so high. So it's like, it's never been easier, but it's never been harder, right? There's an expectation of so much new content around the same thing that you're trying to promote for ages. And that's overwhelming. And there are people that can help you. They might be managers, there might be other people. And I think it's just like not being afraid to ask questions, right? Because like, ask questions, ask for advice. Like speak to people who are managers, and like they might not be the right fit for you, but they might know someone who is, and that's often the case. So I think it's just like, approaching, like if you're looking for a manager, you can get in touch with Music Managers Forum, like MMF, and tell them like, here's where I'm at in my career, here's what I want to do, and they might be able to recommend someone. They used to have a request a manager sort of feature on the website. I don't know if that's still there, but you can like say that you're looking for someone, and they might be able to put you in touch.
Yeah, I think the way I like to think about that, I've heard that idea a lot about, is it sort of easier than ever to be an artist? I think the way I like to think about it is that it's never been cheaper because there are so many like free tools and access and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean it's never been easier, because by default that means that there's so much more competition, there's so many more artists. And not just that, but these days you're sort of competing with entertainment as a whole and social media and stuff, and it's probably harder than ever to get people's attention. It's why there's people who are masters at getting people's attention that are paid like unbelievable amounts of money, because it's such a sort of defined skill in that way. Simeon, I want to sort of come to you on, while we're on sort of managers and stuff. At the Musicians Uni, I'm sure you deal with a lot of people where there are sort of certain red flags around like managers or contracts and that kind of stuff. What are the sort of common red flags with managers to look out for?
I've got to say, the biggest red flag. No, it's fine. You'll probably agree with me, to be honest. The biggest red flag is like agreeing to do stuff verbally on a kind of matesy kind of vibe, and then having the proper arguments about the detail later on. And it's really important you know what the terms are of your agreement with your manager, right? So just, even if you agree the headlines, like the headlines of like, how long's the deal for? Is there going to be a sunset clause? Like, how are we going to part ways amicably? What percentage of stuff are you going to take? And what are you going to agree to do for me? And how do we resolve things? And even as I talk through that list of like headlines, I'm like, just get a management contract. Like, just get something in writing that like really explains the relationship. Have the conversation, debate it, have a bit of consultation about it and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, getting something in writing that agrees it, because the issue I have with some members is they'll come to me and say, yeah, I agree for them to be a manager, but we didn't really talk about numbers. We didn't really talk about how we finish it, how we terminate it if we want to. So yeah, I'd say that's one of the red flags. Is someone that, and you do rely on mates a lot at the start of your like musical career, right? And so it might be that you've got a mate who's like just starting out as a manager and you're just starting out as an artist, and you try each other out, and that's really good and healthy, but I'd still try and agree what are the vague sort of terms, the general terms of your engagement, because it might cause issues later.
Yeah, I feel like one of the tricky things with that is that you can, firstly, you're then entering a sort of legal world that can be difficult to navigate, but secondly, I feel like people might feel like they're going to come across as a bit of a dick if you're like just sort of working with like one of your mates or something, and then you're like, oh, by the way, can you sign this big contract? How do you sort of navigate that side of things?
But I do think fundamentally we call it the music business, and it is a business and it's an industry, and it's really important for everyone to protect their interests, both the manager and the artist, and that's what's really important about it, because it can be exploitative on both ends, and so I think it's just very important to get it. But I get it. It can seem a bit dicky, right?
I don't think it is, by the way, but like, you know what I mean, right? Where you sort of, there's someone that you're like really close with, and you just, if the assumption is that you were just going to do it as mates or something, it can feel like a bit, oh, they're sort of taking this seriously. Or on the other side of things, that they might think that you're trying to take advantage of them or something.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I think like, you can do like just a little casual email to each other and be like, yeah, we're not entering into anything serious here. This isn't an exclusive arrangement. Something that's just a bit like, yeah, we're going to help each other out. And if this couple of things goes well, maybe I'll take 10%, 20% of it, whatever, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, I get it. It's difficult, right? It's like co-writing, You can write a song together and I could hand you a co-writing contract immediately afterwards once we've written the most beautiful love song together in a room in this really romantic way. I'm like, 50%, please. It's a bit of a dick move, but it's like, it stops the dispute later down the line. So dick move now rather than legal dick move in 10 years, I guess would be the debate. That's the thing. I've said dick a lot.
Yeah. Is that something that you've had to navigate as well, Mally, in terms of managing those relationships with your artists?
Yeah, and it's difficult as well when you, particularly like in my case, a few of the artists I manage are friends, and it is difficult because you're like, well, but we're friends, we trust each other, but you do have to like, no, we do have to have a contract, otherwise it's not fair on you and it's not fair on me. And that's ultimately what it is. You're protecting yourself, you're protecting them, and if everyone's happy, there shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. Moving back to the sort of marketing side of things a bit. We've talked, it's funny because it's sort of labelled as a marketing panel, but in terms of that side of things, we've really only talked about social media, Which do you think that artists are sort of like too reliant on that as a way of marketing their music?
Yeah, I think you just can't escape social media, can you? It's everywhere. Virtually everyone's got it. If you've got a phone, you've got access to it. There's a lot less take in physical marketing, posters, flyers. It's becoming less common. And I guess I don't blame people, it costs money when you have to print things. As little as it might be, it's still money with social media. You can put it out for free and at least a certain amount of your following is going to see it rather than sticking it in a toilet somewhere and nobody takes notice.
I mean, do you think, I think there is a problem there. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying, but like, I think the problem is, you mentioned that sort of a certain amount of your followers will see it, but the problem with social media is that you don't sort of control how many people are going to see what you're doing, and that can then make it difficult because, I mean, people will talk about being like shadow banned and stuff, and there's elements to whether that's true or not true. But even just on a really simple level, like I know there was like a lot of controversy around James Blake sort of talking about how his gig posts never actually sort of seem to be seen by his followers and liked by his followers, and that's something that then he feels like he lacks control over. So like, yeah, is that something that sort of we take for granted, that it's always going to be there and that it might sort of change? That makes sense.
Yeah, like ultimately, social media platforms are businesses too, right? And they have their own terms of service, and they can kind of do what they want. And so you have to bear that in mind, I guess, when you're engaging with it, and do maybe skim over the terms of service. They're really boring, but like do it, because sometimes a post might get muted, a video might get muted on like Facebook or something like that, or something might get taken down because someone might put a vexatious copyright claim against you, and the company, rather than actually looking into it, even though it's a vexatious claim that has no merit, take the video down because it's easier. And like, so there's loads of stuff like that where you're just kind of at the whim of Elon Musk, who's now Department of Government Efficiency or whatever in the US, but he's the richest man in the world. He has taken over Twitter, which I still refuse to call X. But
it's Twitter. It's
Twitter,
a safe space. Yeah. We can call it Twitter.
We're going to send a tweet later about it. But The Guardian left Twitter today, right? Like Twitter might be irrelevant in a week, or it might be super relevant. Who knows? But like that's the thing. Social media platforms will come and go. Things will change. Things will become relevant. Like, do you remember when Threads was there for like a hot minute, and everyone was like, "Yeah, Threads is the thing," and then it's not. I mean, we just don't know what the space will look like in 5 years' time. To be honest, and the algorithms, they act in their own rogue way, and they will push things. And so, yeah, you're right. Like, we are over reliant on social media. But then the first thing I touch in the morning most days is a phone, and the last thing I touch at night when I set my alarm is my phone. And it's like it's there all the time, isn't it? And that's fundamentally where we are. So it's where we're engaging with content most of the time, unfortunately.
What sort of are those methods outside of social media where artists can sort of promote their music?
Mailing lists is a really big one and a really good one. That's like something I can't recommend enough to artists. You're getting your fans' data. You're getting a direct stream of content to them. An email goes direct. It can't be avoided unless it goes in the spam box. But if they're signing up to your mailing list, you shouldn't go in the spam box. You retain a lot of control with a mailing list, whereas with social media you don't.
It's that sort of like meaningful buy-in, isn't it, that you can get from mailing lists. I think is really important, and being able to update your fans. And then more like the sort of person that will sign up to a mailing list is more likely to buy your vinyl and more likely to come to your gig, fundamentally, and that's where the money is.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm sort of working somewhere where we sort of have a big mailing list and stuff, and we sort of talk about, like, in theory you think it's like, our click-through rate is 30% or something, and in theory you think that's not like great if only 30% of the people are actually clicking on the email. But if you think about it and you think of, if you look at, say, your last post on Instagram or something, and you look at the amount of likes as a percentage of your follower count, it's way less than that, because ultimately there's never been more content coming up to distract people. And I think, not to get too into it, but with sort of generative AI and stuff like that as well, there's just going to be the ability to make so much more content quicker that sort of just clogs up everyone's feed and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I think it's interesting, a lot of artists are also sort of leaning towards like Discord channels and things like that, and WhatsApp groups and things like that. Do you think that sort of direct to fan route might be sort of a slightly bigger thing over the next few years?
Yeah, because I think that. Sorry, I'm just jumping in, but
right.
like the like a lot of podcasts have been doing this, right? Where they'll be like, podcasts are free, they have adverts, you can pay a couple of quid a month and become like a premium member, no adverts, and an exclusive WhatsApp channel or Discord feed or whatever. But actually, like that's about that more traditional, like closed shop fan engagement, which is going to be so rich for like building that sort of like meaningful engagement with a fan. So I think you're right. I think like, yeah, Discord, mailing lists, they're similar sorts of things, aren't they, in terms of what they do, but they cut through the noise, which is like social media, which is like Temu stuff being promoted to you or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Just sort of to wrap this sort of side of things up, we're talking about sort of direct to fan stuff and social. I think it applies to social media as well. Like, how do you, if you're an artist, I think it can often feel like, I think a lot of artists have that feeling inside them of like, oh, I'm being too promotional, or like I'm sort of pushing things. So like, how do you sort of overcome that and yeah, so how do you sort of overcome that feeling and create stuff that feels not too pushy, but whilst also telling people, oh, I've got this thing that you can check out?
I think balance in it. Don't make every post. It's the song. It's the song. Listen to the song. Stream the song. Pre-save the song. Blah, blah, blah. You know, have a bit of a balance. It also keeps you sane. You know, keeps your audience engaged, but it also stops you feeling like you're just a marketing machine. You know, post like gig photos, whatever, personal photos, personal videos. Having a good balance, not overdoing it, I think.
Yeah, I think if you have like the basics, like your link tree in the bio or whatever, so that people can find you when they want to engage with you, well then you can post like more fun content. Like you can do maybe not engagement bait, but you know what I mean, like something that's just actually really like a really quirky cover of something or whatever, or your take on something, or get involved with the latest trend or meme, however soul destroying that might be for you. Like, but that might be a more interesting way for you to get people to get to the link tree and ultimately discover you and like you, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to feel like engagement bait. I think it's okay to accept that in the modern landscape, you have to sort of hook people in, and that like first sort of 3 seconds of a video or the first few lines of a written post or something has to be something that makes people want to read more. But I think the key there is that as long as the post in itself, or whatever the content or marketing thing in it is in itself, has the value there, as opposed to, as you said, if you just post like my new song's out, the value is only really there for that person if they then go through and listen to that song. And then I think that's what, to me at least, as someone sort of who follows a lot of artists, sort of that's what feels more transactional than, say, creating a really interesting looking video or something that then features the song, or that has an interesting sort of hook at the beginning that makes you want to watch. But ultimately, if you've enjoyed that time at the end, then I don't think it matters. Right? Thoughts?
I mean, it's like a closing statement of joy, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you enjoy your time at the end, that's all that really matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we will wrap it up there. I've got one more question for both of you, which is just like a sort of more general thing. What advice would you have for an artist that's either starting out with like marketing their music, or feels a little bit stuck, or like just needs a sort of a bit of like a push or like a bit of direction? What advice would you give to that artist?
Research. Just research, not in the sense of reading books and looking at literature, but research on socials. Like Liverpool's a great place to do this, in the sense of like, you can, like in here, if you look at the wall, it's covered in stickers. There's stickers over there. Is that a good way to market? You know, like walk about, see, look on your phone, look at. The more knowledge you have, the more power you'll have with it.
Mm.
Ask questions, ask for advice, be curious. It's the same as research, really. But I guess it's just like, yeah, people are willing to help, you know, and there's some great organisations in Merseyside and some great initiatives. You know, Sound Advice podcast is a great initiative, you know, as is Future Yard in Birkenhead is a great venue that you can engage with. There's loads of great things and organisations you can engage with. So ask questions, ring people up, drop them an email. You'd be surprised how many people might answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, and I'll end on just a piece of advice that always has stuck with me, which is that like you said about like emailing people and just asking, getting sort of getting a no on that kind of thing, like asking someone for advice and them not replying or something, the more reps of that you get in, the more great stuff will happen, the more like emails where you will get a reply and that kind of stuff. So don't take rejection to heart. Like let that kind of thing just like keep you going, and the more no's you get, the more yeses you'll get because you'll be asking the right questions, I think.